We are very pleased to welcome Craig McKim, Director Craig McKim Business Development, as the moderator of our fantastic skills panel. And on our panel, we have Drew Neckar, President and Principal Consultant at Security Advisors Consulting Group. We have David Schlecte, Protection Specialist at the Maverick Protection Group, and Michael Delamere, President at Premier Risk Solutions. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here. How are you doing?
Glad to be here.
Great, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, Craig, you're moderating this panel, so I will take a back seat. But what are we going to be talking about with this session, Craig?
Well, there's a couple things that we are gonna hit on, and it's going to be one, like we just talked about, skills. And what are the ones? What do we need to develop? What do our future protectors develop as we are modernizing? Not only protectors today, but those who are coming kind of behind us, and those who are looking at it, whether they are coming out of college or coming out of the military, starting a second career, what needs to happen? Also, modernizing and how we communicate, which that might be one of the skills, right? So we're going to talk about that, and also where do we see maybe the business coming from over the next, 20 years, maybe next year, maybe in 20 years, where is it? And then, we're going to talk about maybe where we should be looking and the skills that people may already have, that that maybe we've overlooked, up until this point, or we're now just starting to look at it. Where can we start looking outside of the traditional routes into this profession?
I love it. Well, Craig, you have the floor. I'll be back soon.
Excellent. Thank you. Gents, how we doing? Thanks so much for joining this panel. Thanks for allowing me to lead it. I've just recently connected with Drew. So Drew, thanks for accepting my LinkedIn invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to virtually meet you.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Mike, obviously I've known you for years. Great to see you here, Dave. Thank you for being here. We've gotten to know each other here recently. And so I'm just happy to be here and happy to have the different perspectives that we're going to have here. So I'd like to start with Drew. I'd like to direct this to you, and then maybe Mike, you can take a swing at this, and we'll go from there. But in regards to business, and like I mentioned, communication for future protectors, or even people that need to bone up now, what are the most important 2 to 3 skills or tools people should seek to develop?
I think really the most important tool set that I'm seeing, it was touched on in a couple of the previous panels and the previous presentations, is really an understanding of the business that they're protecting. That I consult with organizations across a number of sectors, and that's one thing I see on a fairly regular basis, is that there's a disconnect between the security function of the business and the business itself. The security function is saying, yes, we protect the business, but they don't really understand the business and working toward that. I think that has to cascade down the security manager, CSO, whoever is in charge of that security function has to really understand what the business is trying to do and how it accomplishes that, and then has to cascade that down to all of the employees within the security function, so that from the person who's managing the technology to the person who's sitting at the door checking an ID understands what their role is in making that company work. And I think there are a lot of companies that do it well, but there are also a lot of them that are missing that currently. And I'd say that is by far the most important thing. And you want 2 to 3, probably the next is understanding all of the technology that's out there, because we have, and I see it across the board, I don't think I've ever assessed an organization that was utilizing all of the security technology they had bought to its fullest. And I think that is because of a knowledge gap, and it's also because of resources and things like that. But I think having that understanding and really building that are really important, and will be even more important going forward as there's more technology out there.
Gotcha. Mike, what do you say?
Yeah, the value that you present to the organization you're representing, whether you're in a contract capacity or a proprietary capacity for a company, that's paramount to the success. And how do you do that? It's through the level of engagement that you have in your day-to-day responsibilities and duties for your employer. And, when you talk about one element that I believe is going to get you there is your soft skills, and being able to develop those. And you can certainly go to, a multitude of coursework where you can develop your emotional intelligence. Ivor, had a lot of context there in his presentation that I have a special affinity for, because in our company, we use data sciences to onboard people. And we've gone through job benchmarks with subject matter experts to clearly define what are those elements that are going to make the security driver, EP specialist, workplace violence protection specialist, whatever the role might be, that somebody's going to fulfill to make them successful, fully engaged within their role in the company, and ultimately lead to the efficiencies of the operation, and create that value for the customer or client they happen to be servicing.
Right. And Dave, you got anything to add?
I agree with both of you, and Ivor did. That was incredible. Some of the points he touched on, and Michael, I'll be contacting you about the pre-employment stuff there that you do. I'd like to speak a little further with you. That's kind of in my wheelhouse. And speaking to that, the behavioral psychology type skills, the soft skills by itself, but then also pre-threat indicators, profiling. OSINT has been a big thing with agents as far as, I just had one of my agents text me an incredible he just happens in class at a workplace, that's adding the value. As the issue is finding the talent and treating them correctly too. And by treating them, the pay is one thing, but there's so many other things. One thing we do in our organization is, we offer free training, required reading. We're looking at, some insurance things and a few other kind of benefits that just don't exist in the industry, that we've seen at least. And granted, I'm only in Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky right now. So yeah, treating your people, your team, your tribe is everything. And that's what reflects on us. And we just got back from a detail in Ohio where they were, I think we created raving fans. I mean, they couldn't believe how great our communication was, et cetera, et cetera. That's the key.
Right. Well, I think I can kind of sum this up from what I'm gathering kind of from everybody here. And I think it's a little bit of what kind of a hybrid of what Ivor was talking about earlier is really a comprehension of what, kind of what Drew said, into, what the business is, but developing an EQ and, and can you create the skill of caring, really about not only your client, but also your team, their I guess kind of their well-being, as well as with the client, their company, and what their mission is. You have to care about all of it. And it seems like that's something that can be learned. So with that, I want to kind of redirect here just a little bit. And, this can be kind of, well, I don't know about a short answer because we're going to talk about social media here for a second. So with that, because I know there's opinions, right? But for the protectors, again, protectors of tomorrow, who will be looking to either find work or to start a business, what type of social media presence do you think is best for them, kind of in your experience, but also what you're consuming as you're online, looking at people that you either admire or people that you might detest. So I'd love to hear kind of a little bit, like, where do you think that is? And I'm sorry, Mike, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. No, I have a love-hate relationship with social media,
Right,
as most people probably do. But from a professional capacity, I look at it, there's a personal branding, which is me, the individual, and then there's the professional branding, which is my company. And, we, from a company perspective, have separate profiles. They're not one and the same. It's not about me, it's about the company. And we like to educate. That's our primary objective and primary goal, is to share information with people that is valuable, and not fear mongering or anything along those lines. Simply something that is very positive, something that they need to be aware of. And then on the professional side of things, we, or I should say, try to post probably once a week or somewhere thereabout, something that is relevant to my network, something that they would find some value in as well. And really, the overarching theme that you see here is value, both in the professional and in the personal side of things. So being regular with your content and providing value are kind of the hallmarks that I really look at from both the personal branding and professional branding side of things.
Good. And do you think where they spend their time, meaning what platform is more, is there, what would you think is more beneficial for,
Sure.
For that?
I definitely consider LinkedIn the better place to network for that. Certainly there's groups on Facebook as well that you can join and subscribe to. I spend most of my time with LinkedIn. That's the primary focus for me.
Gotcha. Yeah. Dave, what do you think? Protectors Tomorrow, social media, where should they be? What should they do?
TikTok? No, I'm just kidding. LinkedIn obviously is the obvious one. The Protector app that Elijah Shaw and I think it was Mark James through the what is it, the ABA. That's been a growing platform, and honestly, Clubhouse has been a growing platform. There's you have the ability to reach a lot of industry people who are listening to executive protection specific podcasts. CICP does one, I think Elijah does one, and I think Monica Rodriguez does one. So there's 3 opportunities a week to connect with all different kinds of people who are either just getting into the business or who have been in it a long time. But the coolest part is that the access you actually get to have a conversation with somebody who's there to have a conversation, as opposed to just hitting them up randomly. So LinkedIn, Clubhouse, and not TikTok. So that's kind of the dark side of the force. I'm looking at your coffee cup there, Drew. So
Right. Drew, what do you think? Anything to add to that?
I typically do it. I can almost mirror what Michael said. Is I spend the majority of my time on LinkedIn, have separate business and personal profiles. I mean, I also do on Twitter and Facebook, but the vast majority of the business related content that I'm looking at is on LinkedIn. It really is. I've got a decent sized network that I've grown there, and a lot of people that post really interesting information on a daily basis. And that is really kind of my goal with the platform as well, is sharing whatever I have, whether it's information I've seen from somebody else or something we put together, and putting it out there and really helping the industry grow. As well, there's a few podcasts that I listen to on a regular basis, but I would say the vast majority of the content that I'm looking at, and frankly that I put out and get reactions to, is on LinkedIn. I'll put the same content out on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and it's really LinkedIn where I get the value and get the comment and get conversations with people.
Nice. Right. Yeah, I think that's pretty across the board. When you're trying to keep it professional, and knowledge based, and where there's maybe a little less opinion than you might find on these other platforms, until you get to the groups. And even in the groups, it feels like Facebook might be a little bit more potentially free spirited with opinions and what people are willing to say, whereas LinkedIn, I think there's just the air of that where you find some really valuable information. So
absolutely. Though, just one last comment
yeah,
is when I initially set up social media profiles, I tried to keep professional Drew and personal Drew, completely separate. And I've found over the last couple of years that's becoming more and more difficult. And in fact, finally just kind of gave up on that and said, okay, I need to be me no matter where I am. So, and that's something I think I'm seeing from a lot of people, is that when social media was really gaining momentum, there was a push to, okay, LinkedIn me is different than Facebook me, is different than Twitter me. But now that's becoming more and more difficult. And I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I agree. But I want to do, I like, boy, we could, social media, right, on and on, right? But I do want to get kind of moving forward here. We're closing in on some time here, but as far as business that's coming, right? And when I say that, like over the years, like you said, next year into 20 years, where do you see the business coming from? Either the organizations, or, and when I say, business, your private, governmental, or, nonprofit, like, where do you see it coming from? And also, where should the protectors that are coming into the business, or the business owners, where do they focus? Or where should they focus, or where do you see that? Where do you see that growing the most? And Dave, you want to jump on that first?
Yeah, I mean, from a corporate security standpoint, private, I don't have as much experience with government stuff, so it's hard for me to speak to that side. I can tell you on the work protection side, where the business, it's sort of a trend of almost a quick reaction force type thing. I wish that, they would have put a program in place first. That would always be nice, right? But they really don't want to spend the money or do the program until they're liable, unfortunately, or they see liability in the future. So a lot of difficult terminations or upcoming terminations, they'll call a group of us that have sort of gotten pretty good at just covertly making sure everything goes okay. Other times we've done strike protection for corporations, and I live in Detroit, so you guys can understand the strikes here are different than anywhere else in the country. They're a little more sophisticated. So last one, they used drones, they jammed our radios. It was interesting. So fairly impressive. But yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And then, as a shoot or an offshoot from that, maybe at some point, some of these companies will decide that maybe we should lots of bang here as opposed to waiting. And so I think that with the active shooting and all that going on, I think that creating an environment of comfort for their employees seems to be, as far as safety goes, top priority. And of course, covering their own asses. So.
Right. Sure. Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say from a really broad brush perspective, business acumen, being able to speak the language of the C-suite for the leadership team, and being able to translate to the business the value again that their department provides. Understanding financial statements, being able to speak to shareholder value. That's what the C-suite tends to care about. And if you can speak that language, then you're going to be able to get the dollars in the budget to be able to develop your department the way that you absolutely need to. And I still see that there's a pretty good, significant need out there for that on the leadership side. So the more we can hone in on that business acumen skill set, the better the department and the business will be for it.
So I mean, it sounds like we are kind of in agreement here that it's still corporate, so we're still coming from the private side, and but focusing on I guess focusing there overall is where anybody coming up should still be looking, which is kind of where we are now, in my opinion. Now, so before the previous questions, we've been geared toward those coming into the business in the future, but for employers of the future, how do you think it is best to attract and communicate with those following us? Like, how do we get in front of those protectors that are that are coming, tomorrow and 10 years down the line? How do we get in front of them? How do we get in front of them best, and how do we communicate with them best? Mike, I'd like you to lead that off.
So you're talking about the people who aren't yet in the industry?
Correct.
Okay. Well, it's students, first and foremost. I was on the advisory board for Seattle University for a number of years, and I just stepped away from that this year. But trying to educate the leadership of the academic world at that level about what we do in the private sector. They're really good about understanding the public sector, law enforcement, and even behavioral psychology these days in general terms, but still really grasping what the profession in the private sector is. And many, many moons ago, when I started in this industry, I had a boss of mine who said, "Hey, you can make just as much money, if not more, in the private sector without carrying around a gun and getting shot at every day." And there's not a lot of flaw to that logic still to this day. And just getting that message out there to that young student body basis, I think, is going to be paramount to future success.
Cool. Drew, and with that, I'm kind of piggybacking off what Mike said of how do we do that? And is it, and when I say how, are we looking at more social media, which I think that's, yes, absolutely. But kind of where, but then also, is there still recruitment? Is there still live in-person recruitment sessions? Is there still, how do we best get in front of them to deliver the message that Mike's talking about?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I know the answer to it. In my years in the industry, I had a similar experience that Mike did, is that my plan wasn't to be a director of security somewhere or a security consultant. I got a security guard job at a hospital and ended up having a boss eventually who had been on the law enforcement side. And that was where I was planning on going when I finished my education, and said, "Is that really what you want to do? Look at all these opportunities in corporate security." And that's how I ended up where I am. And frankly, I don't know that I have ever met anyone in a corporate security role who said, "Yep, this was my goal from day one. I went to school knowing I was going to be the head of security for a company." I really don't. They've followed a lot of different paths there, but how to get in front of a group of people who don't know they're a group of people, frankly, is the difficult piece. And I think the security industry as a whole needs to reform its image, because I think that is the biggest reason for people not seeing it as a career. When you say security to somebody who's not involved in the industry, all they think of is the guard in a sloppy uniform with food stains on his tie sitting at a desk. And how do we reform that image? And that's a bigger question than I can answer, other than maybe one company at a time.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that if you were to say, or anybody, to paint a brush with a broad brush is when if you say security to anyone, understanding what many of us still do in the corporate realm is nowhere. It may start there, but it's nowhere really near that end of it. There's refinement and there's sophistication with the things that we're doing, but the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and that's the one with the guy with the sloppy uniform and the food stained tie. So but I agree with you that it's very much it's piece by piece, and people that don't know that they're in a group. We know we're in a group, so it kind of becomes our mission that we need to do that. So I'd like to. So my final question that I have for you all, at this point, we all know, or we're all familiar with the typical backgrounds that are desirable in executive protection or corporate security. And that usually goes back to law enforcement, military. They reign supreme, right? But moving forward, what are some of the other work backgrounds that would be desirable for this career path? Or where can we look to find the next batch of talent, or the next, managers, the next, as Ivor said, you have to carry EQ, all that stuff. Where can that come service? Where can that come from? And Drew, I'd like to start with you, if you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right that kind of law enforcement, military, government three-letter agency backgrounds really have been the go-to for a lot of companies for kind of their security leaders. Is that always successful? Not always. A lot of people can make that transition. A lot can't. I think one thing we as an industry could do is really look at, it comes back to the last question, informing people of what corporate security is. And maybe we need a formal definition ourselves before we get to that. But it's looking at those who may have gone to school for other industry, well, not industries, but other specialties, who know they're involved in business, but don't understand how they relate to security, whether it's the person who's just come out of school with a degree in HR or information technology or business, and introducing them to the world of corporate security. And okay, here are the things you're already doing that fit into this bucket. And guess what? These are some of the really exciting things you get to deal with. Because I have found with different companies that a lot of people in those other specialties really get interested in security when they realize, oh, it's not just that guy at the desk. It's intelligence, it's technology, it's training, all of these pieces that are key to a program.
Yeah, right. Dave, thoughts on that?
Yeah, completely agree. Another one that I always thought of was psychology. You know, if somebody doesn't want to go on to further education, they end up getting their psych degree for 4 years and they have their psych degree. But yeah, from a facilitation standpoint, and that's really what we all are, right? As facilitators, their EQ, that theoretically at least, could be pretty high. You know, and I think Drew is dead on. It's an education piece. I mean, maybe we go to career fairs. You know, maybe we go to the same way, like, hey, this is an industry that's available to you. Of course, like Drew said, we need to define that as well. But this is I'm included here. This is an aging population of professionals, and the amount of young people that are coming in are finding it difficult to, one, find work, right? But two, almost everybody, like you guys have said, it falls into it. You ask them, well, how'd you get into this? Well, I met this guy at a grocery store who told me about this lady who needed some help. And, you know, Chris Rankin has a great story about how he got into that. And it's just about that, you know, falling into it. So, yeah, I'm not sure that there's a definitive answer, but I think going to the schools themselves and letting them know that we're not all mall cops. You know.
Yeah, gotcha. Cool. And Mike, any thoughts on that? If we have time, if not, tell them. I'll let y'all turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I believe hard skills can be learned. They can be taught. So with that said, I think an area that we could tap into, because they do deal with high-level VIPs, they deal with volatile people, and they have great customer service skills, typically, is hospitality. So if we get those folks interested in this industry and teach them, learn the ways of the hard skills on how to do surveillance, how to do protection, that's an untapped resource.
And I would agree, coming from a hospitality background myself, spending a number of years in Vegas, that was really what everything hinged on, whether you were serving drinks or whether you were, you know, securing a building. Yeah, hospitality, my personal opinion is hospitality is a great place to look for it, especially for people that are looking for potentially those exciting things day to day. Anyway, folks, Pelham just popped back up. Looks like it's time to go. Thank you for being here. And every one of these gentlemen are on LinkedIn. So if you haven't connected with them yet, please do. I'm there as well.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, Craig. And thanks to Drew, Michael, and David for such a great panel. Please give them a big virtual round of applause. And we look forward to seeing you in the audience.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon. And yes, I love that topic. Lots and lots to play for. And of course, there is technological advancement in corporate security, but it won't happen without the training. And so the training is modernization.